What is going on YouTube? Gabus here and welcome to the 17th episode of the Tech Pills weekly live stream. Alright, let's jump right to the first news of today. So, GNOME could be heading towards a convergent design pretty soon. So, let me actually share my screen here and show you what I'm talking about, alright? Okay, so what you're seeing here are some new mockups for GNOME Shell designed by the Purism and GNOME designer Tobias Bernard. And these new mockups are apparently made towards a new experience with GNOME, basically a convergent experience for both small screen and larger screen devices. And the nice thing about this interface, and I'll be showing you more as I go, is that it's practically designed with many touch interface elements in mind. In particular, it feels like kind of a mix between GNOME and the current FOSS shell using the Librem 5 phone, used by the Purism Librem 5 phone. And in particular, these new mockups, I mean, they're if you take a close look at them, it's clear that they're designed with gestures in mind, with touchscreen gestures, which is very convenient with phone and tablet interfaces. And I mean, let's jump back to the screenshots for a moment. All right, so as you see here, we have we have no more workspace switcher. We instead have an activity switcher with applications that are tiled side by side or just full screen if you just want to have one application. So it's very reminiscent of the current phone interfaces of the most popular phone operating systems out there. And this is a view of the proposed split design. As you see, we have a big handle here that's more touch friendly, and we also have a phone view of what should look like on a phone. So you see pretty similar interface, same concept, and we have the possibility to do things like swiping up to close applications or use like an X button like you used to in the current GNOME Shell design. Let's jump to another mock-up. So here are these are actually pretty outdated but still quite relevant. This is a mockup for a combined notification and quick settings panel, which is very interesting. And the fact that we're probably at this point, at least there's interest in having some quick settings integrated into the desktop environment is very useful. We already have some quick settings for Wi-Fi, VPN, and Bluetooth, but still having like a proper quick settings panel with like the notification toggle and battery indicator and other miscellaneous settings that you can toggle is a very interesting idea. I don't know if they will go through with it. Again, these are very early mock-ups, and none of this is definitive in any way, but still very interesting to look at. So these are, as I said earlier, designs, and as you can see, the interface is kind of different compared to the previous one. This actually is the landscape mode on a phone. So as you see, all the UI elements are a little more crammed together to be able to accommodate for the smaller vertical size. And here we have some other screenshots that are more focused. In this case, this is the tiling portion of the mockup. And an interesting thing is that we don't have the top panel anymore, and instead we have this like bottom bar that combines clock, system tray, as well as the gesture up, whatever arrow I mean that we already have in Phosh. Again, this is tiling, and in this particular case, we have 3 split windows, which is very interesting. And I think it kind of reminds me of i3 and other tiling window managers in the way that it approaches the workflow. Of course, if you're aiming to have a touch focused interface, it makes sense to have tiling instead of floating window management. It's easier to manage, and overall it should just work better. And let's actually jump to probably the most interesting part of these mockup. And this is a very wild and different thing from what you're used to in GNOME. So this should represent, this whole darker area should represent a whole screenshot. Of course, this is just a mockup, but the idea here is that we could have, like, as you see here, we have the calendar and the weather and upcoming events on the calendar, which makes sense, on a left panel that can be toggled by clicking on the date and time here on the bottom left corner. And it kind of does this like zoom out thing and shows this other information, which is really cool. I mean, it's very different from whatever from anything I've seen as far as UI design goes. And here on the right, we have basically the same thing, but for quick settings and notifications. So instead of having a drop down like we mostly used to, Lamer Linux says, hello, hey, thanks for joining. Oh, it's not Lamer Linux anymore, it's just Lamer, sorry. I mean, anyway, so again, different from what we've seen before. Instead of having like a drop down notification tray, here we have like this right panel it kind of reminds me of a mix between what Budgie does with the whatever it's called, the Raven menu, and what Windows 8 used to do. It's kind of weird that I remember how Windows 8 behaved as far as quick settings goes, but this is a very interesting new idea, new concept for a very different desktop environment from what we used to. And again, this panel should really be everything from your system tray, your quick settings, and notifications. Maybe it's too much for the same space, but who knows, it still looks interesting and very, very, very nice. So this is basically all I wanted to show as far as the new design mockups go. I mean, I just want to stress that these are just mockups again, that there are no plans of implementing any of this on GNOME Shell at this point. Still, I think that they could be taken into consideration for GNOME 4 possibly. I just hope that the current GNOME layout doesn't change, and this will probably, at least that's my hope, that this will just be like an alternative layout of what we currently have in GNOME, because I don't think that interacting with mouse and keyboard with this kind of layout would be very I mean, it wouldn't really be a great idea. Floating window managers work with mouse and keyboard, and as well as like having docks and panels and all the usual stuff we used to in desktop operating system. I would love to see this on an actual touchscreen device, maybe having like a touch mode or tablet mode toggle that you can just switch from the normal current GNOME Shell interface to the new I don't know, convergent UI. Could be interesting. But anyway, what do you guys think? Would you see yourself using a desktop like this? Or maybe you would change something from what you've seen in the mockups? Let me know in the chat. Alright, so let's move on to the next news of today. The Qt company is moving away, or at least is moving further away from open source. And this is a really sad story, but I think it's worth reporting it. Let's jump to the chat for a moment. Lamer Linux says, I know that GNOME is really all about using keyboard shortcuts instead of mouse and keyboard. Yes, currently GNOME Shell is very focused on keyboard shortcuts. I mean, starting from the super button to all the different accessibility shortcuts that you have in different applications. And there's even a, they're actually even tracking issues on GNOME applications and GNOME affiliated applications to integrate some more consistent keyboard shortcuts across the board. So that's very interesting. And also, one thing that I never understood about people criticizing GNOME, since GNOME 3 came out long time ago at this point, people kept saying that it was a tablet interface and it wouldn't have worked on a desktop. But as we've seen today, they're very focused on keyboard shortcuts and making an efficient use of gestures. Like the hot corner on the top left is very useful, and the fact that you can just have a window overview of everything just by pressing the super key is another very nice thing, as well as of course the Alt F2 launcher, could you call it that? And the fact that you can just hit super and start writing to open any application. That's very useful, and definitely shows that GNOME is very focused on the desktop still. But of course, it makes sense that they're exploring other form factors. And for instance, on tablets, sorry, on tablets you have some very interesting gesture shortcuts that are not very intuitive, probably documented somewhere. But that once you start using them, like swiping from the left corner opens the activities and stuff like that, swiping from the bottom should open the touchscreen keyboard. They're thinking about all different form factor and different use cases here. So GNOME is probably trying to be a universal convergent desktop environment. It's still not there yet, of course, because there are many things that don't work well on smaller screen devices and touchscreen devices, but of course they keep working on it. Archie Bach says, I like the current GNOME layout. Me too, that's the point. I wouldn't want it to change at this point because I'm very used to how it works and I like how it works overall. But again, I don't think that this, or at least I hope that this won't replace the current GNOME workflow. And I don't think it will, honestly. I think this will just be like an alternative mode for GNOME. Shakiba Drawi, sorry if I butchered your name, says it would be interesting to have it just as an option. Exactly my point. Having the possibility to switch to a different layout depending on what you're doing. I'm thinking particularly about convertible devices like those laptops that you can just fold in half and use as tablets. Something like that would be very useful, and possibly you could even script it so that whenever you go to tablet mode, it automatically switches to the tablet mode. Lamer says, I love Plasma way of the desktop, but I love GNOME's keyboard shortcut more than Plasma's. Okay, so about Plasma, I think that every one of the keyboard shortcuts is customizable. Possibly even inside of the ones that are used in the applications are customizable. But I agree with you. I like the GNOME defaults, and I don't like to fiddle with things like keyboard shortcuts myself. So having sane defaults is better than having many options in this case. All right, let's move on. So I was talking about the Qt company moving further away from open source. And again, this is a very sad news, but I think it's worth reporting it just to let you know, guys, what's going on currently with Qt and KDE. So a couple of days ago, a KDE developer commented in a mailing list that the Qt company is evaluating restricting new releases of the Qt toolkit to paying customers for the first 12 months. So let's actually get into some details here. So the KDE guys, the KDE developers are the ones that work on the Plasma desktop, or as it was called previously, the KDE desktop. So KDE is working on the Plasma desktop, and the toolkit that they're using for both the shell itself and the applications is the Qt toolkit, which is a open source cross-platform toolkit developed by, initially I think it was developed by Nokia, then it was acquired by many different companies, and now it is the Qt company. and Qt is widely used in the industry. It has a weird business model in the sense that it is open source, but if you want to use it in commercial applications, or well, if you want to use it, yeah, I think that's the thing. If you want to use Qt in commercial applications, you have to buy a commercial license. So I'm being simplistic here. I never really 100% understood the pricing structure of Qt, and I'm not alone in this. It's kind of confusing in a lot of ways. But anyway, the fact stands that the open source version of Qt was always like on par with the the normal, let's call it proprietary or professional or business oriented version of Qt. So they were basically the same. But apparently they're trying to move away from this model. Their excuse for like restricting, again, they try to restrict the newer versions of Qt to the paying customers for the first 12 months. Their excuse is that they apparently need some short-term revenue due to the current coronavirus pandemic apparently impacting their finances. So I don't know about that. Anyway, not too long ago, they already, before this whole coronavirus craze, they already restricted the LTS releases of Qt to commercial customers only, and that was already a pretty dramatic thing. But anyway, the KDE people and the whole open source community just decided to stick with whatever the latest version of Qt is and just not relying on LTSs anymore. And this new thing, I mean, it only comes as an additional nail in the coffin for the relationship between Qt and the wider open source community. Following the consequential and pre-expectable internet outrage to this news, the Qt company released a brief and honestly underwhelming statement. Quote, "There have been discussions on various internet forums about the future of Qt open source in the last 2 days. The contents do not reflect the views or plans of the Qt company. The Qt company is proud to be committed to its customers, open source, and the Qt governance model." I don't know about you, but that doesn't mean anything at all. At least to me. They're committed to their customers, of course, their company, to open source. Of course, Qt is, at least the base is open source, so they're committed to keeping what's open source still open source, and the Qt governance model, so they're sticking to whatever they're planning to do, apparently. This comment really doesn't mean anything to me. Anyway, let's try to draw some conclusions here, and let's try to understand what's actually going on here and what are the possibilities to come out of this drama. So, the behavior of the Qt company towards the wider open source community, as I've already said, is increasingly hostile. Their licensing and pricing structure is and has always been, as far as I can remember, foggy and unclear at best, to the point of hurting small businesses using Qt commercially due to licensing misunderstandings. So there were actually small development shops that had to rebase their whole project on something else because there was a misunderstanding on what they were allowed to do with the type of Qt license that they chose. So that's very hurtful. I mean, after a company gets burned this way with a piece of software, they're just not gonna use it anymore. So next, KDE is and will always be an open source community project. So even if there was enough money to pay for the commercial version of Qt, that's just not an option. That's not a viable option, and that's not gonna happen because KDE is open source. Everything touching KDE has to be and has to remain open source. So the logical option here would be for KDE to fork Qt. But a hard fork, it's not an easy task, particularly for the KDE people. They're already involved in so much stuff at this point between the regular Plasma desktop and Plasma mobile, and now Plasma big screen, and all of the other things that they're working on. I mean, forking Qt doesn't really sound like an easy task that they can afford by themselves. Still, apparently there are some KDE developers that are proposing to get in contact with Qt stakeholders. So I'm talking about companies or projects unrelated to KDE that use Qt for their products. And the objective here is to organize and prepare for the eventuality of a fork. So they're thinking about it, and they're practically trying to be ready for the possibility of forking, because they can use this, they can use the fact that they can fork as a weapon to deal with the whole Qt company thing. Let's jump to the chat. Let's see what you guys are saying about this. Archie Box says, why did KDE not use GTK in the first place? That's a very old story and goes as far back as KDE goes. I don't think that GTK was a thing when KDE started. So they just used a toolkit that was available and that happened to be Qt. They could have used anything else. They could have used Motif, they could have used Next Step, whatever. They decided to go for Qt. And they were criticized a lot for this choice because I believe, don't quote me on that, but I believe that initially Qt wasn't even open source. Still, they were, the KDE guys were making a Linux desktop based on Qt. So that was very criticized, but it was probably the most popular Linux desktop for a while, at least. Then GNOME came out, and it came out as kind of a response to KDE. They were using the GIMP toolkit, now known as GTK. Yes, GTK was born with GIMP, and they decided to make a desktop that was truly open source based on the GIMP toolkit. And that's that should be it. That should be the story. So KDE didn't use GTK in the first place because GTK wasn't a thing when it started. And you could ask, why didn't you just move to GTK once it came out? I don't know, honestly. They had their reasons. If you've ever used both GTK and Qt as a developer, and I have, you can quickly see that they're two very different toolkits to develop with. So they have some, I mean, paradigm differences, and it's pretty understandable. I mean, they're two completely different products, and it does make sense that they're very different. So I mean, I probably think that the KDE people just like the way Qt works. Otherwise, they would be invested in something else, maybe GNOME or XFCE or Mate. I mean, there are plenty of GTK desktops out there nowadays. So they're sticking to Qt. All right. So again, this is very sad news. I hope that they keep pushing forward with everything that's going on. Should KDE fork or shouldn't they? I think that they should fork. I mean, it's dumb for me to say something like that because it's such a big task. But it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time that the Qt company just steps on the heads of everyone of the open source community that is keeping Qt alive practically because of KDE. Qt is so much used, so much more than it could be otherwise. Anyway, I think that they should fork because in the long run, I think that's gonna be for the best. Still, it's a very difficult task. I hope that they can get in touch with these stakeholders. There are some very big companies that do work with Qt, and maybe if there's enough interest, they can just go ahead and take the effort to fork and go ahead with it. I mean, I don't really know what to think here. I hope that they fork, but if they have to, they need to do it in a proper way. They need to be prepared for it. They don't have to like terminate projects for that, because that would be really sad. Anyway, let's move on to the next news, and let's move to something to good news at least. So GNOME and Endless are launching a so-called community engagement challenge with cash prizes. So the GNOME Foundation, together with Endless, is launching a challenge. The objective is coming up with some form of project that will help in engaging beginner programmers with the free and open source software community. Of course, with the open source community, as everyone else in the development community, we are always in need of new people to come up with new ideas or to keep on innovating on existing ones. This challenge is a great opportunity for all of us, and the objective again here is trying to find some kind of project. It can really be anything. A video, could be a game or an application or web service, whatever you can do. If you have a good idea to help engage in the free software community, you have time until the 1st of July to submit a written proposal of your idea. So if you apply from there, 20 entries will be picked, and each will be given $1,000 to move on to the next phase. In this next phase, you have to create a proof of concept idea, a basic prototype that of what the final project will be, and from this, 4 winners will be selected, and from here and awarded $5,000 each. And they will move on to the last phase, which is to create a finished product, and the winner will receive $15,000 and the runner-up $10,000. So there's a lot of money at stake here. I mean, it's a really great initiative, and if you have some kind of idea to help engaging beginner programmers with free and open source software, just apply. You can visit the challenge webpage at gnome.org/challenge. Again, that's gnome.org/challenge. I'm also gonna link this page in the chat. All right, let's move on to the next news of today. The ebook reader app Foliate has a new big release with many great features. So the already awesome GTK book reader app Foliate has recently released their 2.0 release. The most striking change is that the new version of has a completely redesigned UI. So let me I just want to show you, maybe possibly if I manage to. Wait a second. All right. So this is the new version of the Foliate book reader app, and as you can see, it looks pretty slick. So as soon as you open a new book, you can really appreciate this very nice, interesting interface called distraction-free reading mode, where both the header bar and the bottom bar are hidden and only show up when you put the mouse over them. So as you can see here, here's the transition. Let me actually try to, if I can manage to scale the app so that you can see it better. But I don't think I can. Okay, whatever. So, oh, what happened? I borked it. Oh, come on. Of course, I had to. I somehow deactivated the focus mode. So let me actually reopen it. There we go. I don't know what I did there. Anyway, so as you can see, it's a very slick interface. You see here, there's the Sepia theme, and one of the nice changes here is that they actually introduced many more different themes and the possibility to add even custom themes. So we have light, sepia, gray, dark, invert, which is probably, if you like dark mode, that's probably what you will likely have to use. Solarized light, solarized dark, groovebox light, groovebox dark, and nord. So a pretty big choice of themes here. Let me switch back to sepia. That's what I like for reading books. And also this bottom bar here that shows you the progress in percentage, the chapter, the location of the page, and many other options like these arrows to navigate back and forth between the pages, as well as if you select a word, it opens up this very nice popover that gives you the option to look up in the dictionary, and it's all in this popover, which is very nice, as well as Wikipedia again in the popover, which is a very nice option. You also have the option to translate in whatever language. Say Esperanto, celo is shell. Okay, interesting. So again, let me switch back to the webcam. Very interesting app. Definitely very innovative. Even for a GTK application, there's some stuff that we've never seen, like the fading header bar and bottom bar. And they also introduced many new keyboard shortcuts to facilitate the use of the app without moving away from the keyboard. So that's very nice. And whatever, I mean, if you like reading ebooks, or if you like studying from home, particularly in these days, and you need a very nice distraction-free ebook app, I really suggest you give Foliate a try, and you can find it on FlatHub and possibly even on your repos, depending on the distribution. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. UK UI 3.0 makes the GNOME April Fool's joke shockingly real. So, this year, April Fool's joke from both the KDE and the GNOME community was their supposed merger into one new desktop environment called GNOME. It's all fun and games until it's not anymore. The UK UI desktop environment developed for the Ubuntu Kylin distribution, which is an Ubuntu spin-off designed for the Chinese market, radically changed in the version 3.0. So their desktop uses the Qt toolkit and implements a lot of features and concept of the KDE desktop, but it's actually a lot closer design-wise to the GNOME desktop. So first-party applications, despite being written in Qt, use the familiar header bar design commonly found in GNOME Shell. Let me actually show you that. As you see, this is a screenshot of the file manager, and as you see, you have a completely header bar based design. This looks like a GNOME application, except it has something that GNOME still doesn't have at this point, which is Blur. And let's move on to other nice, interesting features. So the desktop layout, again, is more similar to KDE or Windows 10, with like translucent bottom panel with a start menu and icon-based taskbar on the left side, and the system tray on the right. But other elements are borrowed from GNOME, apart from the header bar thing. We also have a grid-like expose feature that shows running applications aside the virtual desktop switcher. So this is very reminiscent of what GNOME is currently doing. And there's also the full screen application grid. That's again, if you're using GNOME, this probably looks pretty familiar to you. This is very similar to what GNOME is currently doing with their app overview grid. And I mean, KDE also has a launcher that has this kind of layout, but I mean, the inspiration is clearly GNOME Shell for the application launcher, as well as the other parts of the interface. So I mean, this is a very interesting new desktop concept, and these are not mockups. This is actually what UKUI looks like at this point. So I mean, I was shocked when I saw these screenshots. I've never seen something like this. I've never seen a Qt desktop using header bars and client-side decorations, and honestly, it just looks slick. It's a mix between, again, KDE and Windows 10 in some ways, but also some very interesting ideas from GNOME. I think there is a lot to learn from this desktop environment, and it's probably one of the next desktop environments that I'm gonna try for myself. And that's particularly easy for me because the UKUI desktop is already available in the official Arch Linux community repository. So you can just go ahead and sudo pacman s UKUI right now and have it on your system. And that's also a very nice option if you want to try UKUI without installing Ubuntu Kylin, which, by the way, includes some China-specific apps and services. So just so you know. And you can just install UKUI on Arch. Anyway, do you like, guys, the idea? Do you think it will make it far? Let me know in the chat. And we already have some feedback in the chat. Archibok says, is GNOME written in Qt or GTK? GNOME was a joke. I'm sorry that I didn't make it clear. In the first place, GNOME is not a real thing. It was an April Fool's joke. And the funny thing here is that days apart from the joke, we have a proper desktop environment that honestly looks like a combination of KDE and GNOME. Anyway, guys, I think this is gonna wrap it up for today's episode. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you like this video, please make sure to press the thumbs up button down there. Also, remember to subscribe to my channel if you want more of this. Remember to join the awesome TechPills community at techpills.technology/community. You can find the link in the description, as well as the QR codes on the left side of the screen. Thank you again very much, guys, for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.